Welcome back, everyone, to another deep dive. This time, we're taking a look at blockchain and, well, not Bitcoin or NFTs.
Right.
This is about how blockchain is going to be used in defense.
Yeah, that's right.
And I've got an expert here with me today who's going to help us unpack all this.
Definitely. I think, a lot of people, when they hear blockchain, they immediately think like crypto. And I think there's a lot of skepticism, right? That it's sort of a solution looking for a problem. But we're really going to try to drill down today into where it actually has some really practical applications in the defense sector.
Absolutely. So before we get into all of that, for the, maybe two people out there listening to you who don't already know, what exactly is blockchain?
So in its most basic form, a blockchain is a distributed ledger. So it's a record of transactions. But what's unique about it is that it's replicated across multiple computers.
Okay.
So no single entity controls the information.
Oh, okay. So it's not like having one central database that could be hacked or corrupted. It's kind of spread out.
Precisely. And because of that, it's very secure and tamper-resistant.
So every change to this ledger is like permanently recorded and time-stamped.
Exactly. You have this immutable history of transactions.
Okay.
And that's really the core of what makes blockchain so powerful.
Okay, so I get the basic idea, but how does this play out in defense? What makes this immutability, this permanent record, so valuable in a military context?
Well, imagine you're tracking a shipment of critical equipment, maybe weapons or even medical supplies, going to a base overseas.
Okay, yeah.
With a blockchain, you can track every step of the journey, from the factory floor to the front lines, with complete confidence that the records haven't been altered.
So you're eliminating the risk of someone, say, covering up a mistake or intentionally diverting supplies for their own gain.
Precisely. You're creating a level of transparency and accountability that's really hard to achieve with traditional systems.
And that's got to be huge in a world where, lives are on the line.
Absolutely. In defense, trust and reliability are paramount, and blockchain offers a way to really enhance those aspects.
Now, the source material we've been digging into highlights a few key areas within defense where blockchain could be a real game changer. Let's start with supply chain security, which you already touched on.
Yeah, military supply chains are incredibly complex.
Oh, I bet.
You have parts and equipment coming from all over the world, often through multiple contractors and subcontractors. With a blockchain, you can track every single component, every step of the way, ensuring that everything is authentic and hasn't been tampered with.
So no more worrying about some faulty part showing up in a critical piece of equipment, potentially causing a mission failure or, God forbid, putting lives at risk.
Exactly. And think about the medical supply chain.
Right.
Ensuring that medications and equipment are genuine and haven't been counterfeited is absolutely crucial. Blockchain can provide that guarantee.
Makes sense. Now, beyond supply chains, the source also mentions blockchain's potential to revolutionize identity management within the military. What's the thinking there?
So think about the complexities of managing access to secure facilities or sensitive information systems within the military. It's a constant challenge to ensure that only authorized personnel have access, especially with all the contractors and third-party vendors involved.
Yeah, the article even mentions how contractors often have to go through this incredibly time-consuming process just to get access to different buildings or networks. It seems incredibly inefficient.
It is, and blockchain can streamline that entire process. Imagine a system where individuals have secure digital identities stored on the blockchain. These identities contain all the information about their credentials, their security clearances, their access rights.
So it's like having a digital passport that verifies everything instantly. No more waiting weeks for background checks to clear.
Exactly. It's about creating a more agile and secure system.
Okay, so that covers supply chains and identity management. What other areas of defense could be impacted by blockchain?
Well, another area is communications resilience. Blockchain's decentralized nature makes it incredibly resilient to disruption. Even if a central command center is compromised, units in the field could still communicate securely using a blockchain-based network.
It's like having a backup communication system built right in. So even in the most challenging environments, troops could stay connected and coordinate their actions. What are the real-world implications of that?
Well,
So it's not just about preventing data breaches, but also ensuring that the information hasn't been tampered with. That integrity is essential in a world where disinformation and cyber warfare are constant threats.
it is. It's about maintaining trust in the information that's being shared.
This all sounds incredibly promising, but I have to ask, what are some of the challenges of actually implementing blockchain in the defense sector? It seems like such a massive undertaking.
It is. And one of the biggest hurdles is simply the scale and complexity of military organizations. Integrating blockchain into existing systems and processes would require a significant shift in mindset and culture.
It's not just about adopting a new piece of software. It's about rethinking how entire systems operate.
Right. And then there's the issue of interoperability.
Mm.
Different branches of the military and even different countries often use incompatible systems.
Right.
Getting them all to work together seamlessly with blockchain would be a major challenge.
Plus, there's the need to develop standards and protocols for blockchain use in a defense context, right?
Mm,
You don't want a situation where different units are operating on different blockchain systems that can't communicate with each other.
exactly. Standardization is key.
Right.
And of course, there's the need for technical expertise. Blockchain is still a relatively new technology, and finding enough people who can develop, implement, and maintain these systems is a real challenge.
Now, one phrase from the article that really stood out to me was weaponizing blockchain. What does that even mean? It sounds a little ominous.
Yeah, it's a provocative term, but it's important to understand that it doesn't mean creating blockchain-powered weapons.
Yeah.
Instead, it's about leveraging the technology to secure critical systems and data against attack.
So bolstering defenses, not creating new offensive capabilities.
Exactly.
It's about using blockchain to make military operations more resilient and secure in a world that's increasingly reliant on information technology.
Right.
But even with those good intentions, I imagine there are some ethical considerations here as well. Any technology that enhances military capabilities needs to be carefully scrutinized.
Of course. And it's crucial to have open and honest conversations about the potential risks and benefits of blockchain in defense.
Definitely. All right, so we've laid some really good groundwork here, I think, in terms of understanding what blockchain is and how it can be applied in a defense context. But before we get too deep into the ethics of it all, I think we need to dig a little deeper into some specific applications of blockchain in the defense sector.
Okay.
We'll be back after a quick break to do just that. All right, so welcome back to our deep dive on blockchain in defense. Before the break, we were talking about the very real challenges of trying to get this technology, actually working within these massive military organizations.
Yeah, and I think it's important to remember that not all blockchains are created equal. You've got different types, each with its own, pluses and minuses.
So it's not just blockchain. There's a whole, family of different approaches. Could you break that down a bit?
Sure. So you've got your public blockchains, like the one Bitcoin uses. These are completely open. Anyone can join the network.
Okay. So total transparency. Anyone can see all the transactions happening.
Right. That makes them really resilient, but also not ideal for, sensitive military information.
Yeah, that makes sense. So what are the alternatives then if the military needs more privacy?
You've got private blockchains, which are permission-based. Access is restricted to, authorized users only.
So more like a secure intranet within a specific organization?
Yeah, good way to think about it. More control, more privacy, good for managing sensitive data.
Okay, and what about situations where, maybe you need a bit of both, like if different branches of the military need to work together, or even with allies?
Right, so then you have consortium blockchains. Governance is shared among a group of organizations.
So like a middle ground between fully public and fully private.
Exactly. And then you've even got hybrid blockchains that combine elements of both public and private.
Okay, so it sounds like there's a whole toolbox of blockchain options, each designed for a specific job.
That's right. Choosing the right one is key.
Now let's circle back to identity management, which we touched on earlier. The article really dives into how blockchain could, seriously overhaul that whole system within the military.
Yeah. I mean, think about all the complexities, security clearances, background checks, accessing different facilities. It's all incredibly manual and slow right now.
The article even mentioned contractors sometimes having to wait, months just to get the okay to work on a project.
Yeah, it's inefficient and it can really slow things down. Blockchain to streamline all that.
So how would that actually work? Walk me through it.
Okay, so imagine each person has this digital identity on the blockchain, right?
Mm-hmm.
It would hold all their credentials, security clearances, access rights, all that.
So instead of carrying around a ton of ID cards and filling out mountains of paperwork, you'd have this one digital key that verifies everything instantly.
Precisely. And because it's on the blockchain, it can't be forged or tampered with.
And that would help, I guess, with insider threats too, right?
Yeah.
Like if you can track exactly who accessed what information and when, it's harder for someone to get away with something shady.
Absolutely. It increases accountability and makes it much harder for malicious actors to go undetected.
Okay, so that's identity management.
Hmm.
What about cybersecurity more broadly? We talked about it a bit, but I think it's worth digging into the specifics.
Sure. I mean, cybersecurity is huge for the military these days. They're a prime target for hackers, state-sponsored or otherwise.
And the article pointed out how traditional systems are so vulnerable because they have that one central point of failure, right? Like if someone breaches that main database, it's game over.
Exactly. That's where the decentralized nature of blockchain is so powerful. The data is spread out, so it's much harder to take down the whole thing.
Even if part of the network gets hit, the rest can keep running.
Right. And because every transaction is recorded and secured on the blockchain, it's almost impossible to change or delete information without it being noticed.
That level of data integrity seems like crucial now, especially with all the disinformation campaigns and propaganda flying around.
Hmm.
If you can prove that, say, a satellite image hasn't been doctored, that's huge.
It is. It builds trust in the information itself.
And this isn't just about outside attacks either, right?
Oh.
Blockchain could also help prevent leaks or sabotage from within the military.
Absolutely. You have that constant log of who did what, so it makes it much harder to cover your tracks.
Okay, so we've talked about supply chains, identity management, and cybersecurity.
Yeah.
What about actually using blockchain for, military communications on the battlefield?
Right.
The article mentions that specifically.
Right. Well, think about how hard it is to maintain secure comms in a war zone, right?
Yeah.
Troops are moving around, you've got limited bandwidth, unreliable connections, not to mention the enemy trying to jam signals or intercept messages.
Yeah, it sounds like a nightmare.
Traditional systems, relying on a single point of failure like a satellite or radio tower, they're very vulnerable in those environments.
So blockchain could help by decentralizing communications.
Exactly. Instead of relying on one central hub, you could have this network of nodes all communicating directly, even if some get knocked out.
And because the messages are all encrypted and verified using blockchain, it'd be really hard for the enemy to tamper with them.
Right. It makes the whole system much more resilient and secure, even in the most challenging conditions.
Now, all of this sounds amazing, but there have to be some downsides, right? What are some of the risks or ethical concerns with using blockchain in defense?
Well, like any technology, it can be misused. One concern is algorithmic bias.
So you're saying if the data used to train the algorithms is biased, then the system itself could make biased decisions, which could, have some pretty serious consequences in a military context.
Exactly. It's something that needs to be carefully addressed in the design and implementation.
What about the environmental impact? I've heard that some types of blockchain use a ton of energy.
That's true for some, particularly those that use proof-of-work consensus mechanisms. But the community is working on more efficient alternatives and even moving to renewable energy
So
sources.
it's not perfect, but there are ways to minimize the environmental footprint.
Right, and I think the key takeaway is that we need to carefully weigh the potential benefits of blockchain against the risks and use it responsibly.
Which means being transparent about how these systems are being developed and deployed and making sure there are safeguards against misuse.
Exactly. Accountability is crucial.
Okay, so despite all these challenges, it sounds like there's a lot of excitement around blockchain in defense. People really seem to think it could be a game changer.
And that excitement is driven by the fact that this technology is evolving so rapidly. There are new applications and breakthroughs happening all the time.
It feels like we're only just beginning to understand the full potential.
I think that's right. And as the tech matures, we'll see even more interesting applications in the military world.
This has been a really insightful conversation. We've covered a lot, from the different types of blockchain to how it could change things like supply chains, identity management, cybersecurity, even battlefield communications. But before we wrap up, I'd love to get a little more, speculative. What could the future of defense look like with blockchain? Let's take a quick break and come back to explore some of those possibilities. Okay, so we're back, and we've been talking about, the practical stuff, the here and now of how blockchain is being used in defense. But I want to look ahead a bit, get a little sci-fi on you. What does the source say about how this tech could change the face of warfare in the future?
Well, one area that's really interesting is autonomous weapons systems.
Okay, yeah, that's like straight out of Terminator, right? Killer robots and all that.
Yeah, it does sound like that. But these systems are being developed right now, and blockchain could actually play a role in making sure they're used safely and ethically.
Huh. How so? I mean, blockchain is all about transparency and accountability, right?
Mm.
Seems kind of odd to connect that to autonomous weapons.
Yeah, I get that. But think about it. How do you control and monitor these things? How do you make sure they're only doing what they're supposed to, that they don't go rogue, you know?
Right, right.
Blockchain could actually help with that. It could track their actions, make sure they're following the rules, even prevent them from being hijacked by the enemy.
So like an ethical kill switch, basically,
Hmm.
making sure they stay under human control.
That's one idea, yeah.
Yeah.
It could also create a record of everything the weapon does, so if something goes wrong, you can see exactly what happened.
So accountability, even with AI making decisions, that's that's actually pretty important, I guess, especially when it comes to something as serious as warfare.
It is. And it really shows how we need to be thinking about the ethics of this technology every step of the way, not just the cool capabilities.
Absolutely. Any other, I don't know, far out applications of blockchain in defense that caught your eye in the source?
Well, they talked about the potential for a global defense network.
Oh, wow. What would that even look like?
So instead of relying on these traditional alliances, which can be kind of messy, you'd have this blockchain system connecting different militaries and organizations around the world.
Securely, I'm assuming.
Yeah, very secure. Countries could share intelligence, track troop movements, even coordinate operations all through this network.
That's wild. But I mean, you'd need a crazy amount of trust between nations for that to work, right?
You would. But that's what blockchain could help build. Everyone playing by the same rules, everything transparent, every action recorded and verified.
Like I don't know, a global defense ledger. That's kind of mind-blowing when you think about it.
Yeah, it really changes the game, not just in how militaries fight, but how they work together, or at least how they could.
Okay, so we've got to talk about the ethics of all this.
Yeah.
I mean, even if it's for good, using blockchain in defense, it feels like there's a lot of room for things to go wrong, especially as it gets more powerful.
Oh, for sure. We can't just ignore those risks. We have to talk about them.
What are some of the big worries, you think? What should we be keeping an eye on?
Well, one thing is the potential for automation to go too far. Taking humans out of the loop when it comes to making decisions about using force.
That ties back to the autonomous weapons thing, right? Like,
Yeah.
blockchain could make it easier to build these systems, but then do we lose control? Do things escalate faster because there's no human in the loop to, I don't know, hesitate or question orders?
Yeah, those are valid concerns. And that's why it's so important to have clear ethical guidelines and regulations around using blockchain in defense. We can't just assume it'll all work out.
Right, right. What about bias, which we talked about earlier?
Yeah.
If these systems are trained on biased data,
hmm
could they end up making, like, discriminatory decisions, reinforcing existing inequalities, maybe even making them worse?
It's definitely possible. And that's why you need to be really careful about the data that's used to train these systems. It has to be diverse, it has to be representative, and the algorithms themselves have to be designed in a way that minimizes bias.
So a lot of checks and balances, a lot of oversight, not just letting the tech run wild.
That's right. And I think that's true for any powerful new technology. We have to be thoughtful about how we use it.
Absolutely. Well, this has been a pretty fascinating deep dive, I got to say. We've covered a lot of ground here, from the nuts and bolts of what blockchain is to all these ways it could change how militaries operate, from, the supply chain to the actual battlefield. We even got a little futuristic, talking about robot armies and global defense networks.
It's been a great conversation. It really feels like we're on the cusp of something big here.
Yeah, it does. And it's something we need to keep talking about, keep learning about as this technology keeps developing. To everyone listening, we encourage you to do the same. The future of warfare, it's probably going to be shaped by blockchain in ways we can't even fully grasp yet. So thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, stay curious and stay informed.